All right, Shawn, welcome back to the Biohacker Babes. Thank you for joining us again.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love you guys.
Oh, we
We
love
love
you too.
you,
You are a
The
fellow babe.
babes. We're
fellow
all
babe.
babes.
All three are in attendance today.
Yes. So I was doing a quick Google search to see when we last had you on the podcast, and I think Lauren and I were both very shocked. It was May 2021. Don't know where the time has gone. You had just released your book, The Energy Formula. So I'm going to recommend everyone go back, definitely listen to that episode as well. It's episode number 94. Here we are at like 260 something, crazy. But we're going to do a deeper dive into somewhat of the energy crisis, I think, that's happening. And if you are like me, hi, my name is Renee. I am addicted to caffeine. I have tried to get off of it so many times, and it's a powerful drug. And Shawn, I've heard you talk about this. I'm not alone on energy without the caffeine. Yes, watch the YouTube video for sure this time, guys. And it's a powerful drug, and so many people are on this train. And it's not a surprise because if you walk down any city street, you see like two Starbucks next to each other. It's with a line out the door. And something else I have been noticing as I've been traveling a lot is all the hotel rooms all have coffee makers or espresso makers in the room, which I think just shows you how many people are rolling out of bed and immediately saying, oh my God, I need my caffeine fix to function. And it's really not sustainable energy. So we're excited to bring something to our audience today. Dun, 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 dun. Paraxanthine, which we have mentioned literally once on the podcast because Lauren and I drink this. Update, Shawn is holding up. And Lauren, I'm out of my update
Peach
drinks. I'm so
buddies.
sad.
We're peach buddies.
So we're going to share this drink and option with you. But Shawn, you discovered this incredible ingredient. So maybe we can kick off with what is paraxanthine? Because I'm sure most people are like, spinning their head. What is that? And how did you discover it?
Yeah, so cool. You bring up a great point about it's called habituation and adaptation. Like one, habituation is the physiologic dependence on caffeine, and that is very common. 90% of the planet is consuming caffeine in some form or another daily. Think about that. If I told you 90% of the planet showers or 90% of the planet eats, that may not be accurate. Like
That's crazy.
90% of the planet consuming the substance is mind-blowing. But another 90% number that's mind-blowing is 90% of people that consume caffeine want to consume less. So think about that.
Wow.
81% of the planet wants to consume less of the caffeine that they're consuming daily because they know they're addicted to it and it's not good for them. So think about the cognitive dissonance of I need it, but I know it's not good for me. 81% of the planet, which is probably like 6.5 billion people, are saying this to themselves every day when having caffeine.
Mm.
And in a caffeine metabolite, there's three of them. There's theophylline, theobromine, and paraxanthine. Paraxanthine is the majority of the metabolite that's converted from caffeine when your body demethylates it internally. So when you consume caffeine, it's 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. Your body removes one of those methyl groups and it becomes either theobromine, theophylline, or paraxanthine. And about 70 to 80% of it becomes paraxanthine. So traditionally, people would think, why do I need paraxanthine? And this led to no one really pursuing paraxanthine. Here's the problem. Caffeine is often taking 10.5 hours to reduce to half the amount in your blood.
Ooh.
The half-life of caffeine can be 10.5 hours, meaning then another 10.5 hours to get to a quarter, another 10.5 hours to get to an eighth. This means like days later, you're still clearing out caffeine. 60% of us are slow metabolizers of caffeine with CYP1A2 gene. And what this means is I fit in this group as well. I'm in that 60% and more on that kind of extreme slow end, where I was like, man, I don't really get the benefits of caffeine, but I get all the side effects. That's a slow metabolizers. The ultra fast metabolizers, which is probably about 20%, are the people that can have caffeine and go straight to bed. You know those people.
Our mom.
Those are the people.
We do.
Those are the people that don't really get the benefits either, but they don't have the side effects. So caffeine itself is in plants to be toxic to insects. It's actually an insect repellent, and it's fairly toxic to us. Paraxanthine is actually the thing that has the benefits. So yes, you do convert about 70 to 80% of it to paraxanthine, but one, you're also converting to theophylline, which is a controlled substance, a bronchodilator. It has a lot of side effects. Two, it may take days to get to that full conversion of paraxanthine. So it's more of a drip drop. Yes, it'll eventually convert, but you're stuck in toxicity. You're stuck with the other compounds. You're not getting to paraxanthine in any appreciable quantity. So that is the difference. So now when you get rid of theophylline, you get rid of 3-MX and all these other metabolites, you get rid of this CYP1A2 bioindividuality aspect, and you go straight to paraxanthine, skip the caffeine. Now you're feeling the clarity. Now you're getting 50% more dopamine than you would get from caffeine, 50% more nitric oxide to the brain. You're increasing serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine. You are decreasing beta amyloid plaque. You're increasing BDNF. You're increasing glutathione and catalase and decreasing oxidative stress. So you're actually improving the health of your brain by consuming the substance. And that's what we've seen. When we looked at a study where we took athletes and did a 10K race, and they did a multitasking test before and after. In essence, I'm saying multitasking. In reality, there's no such thing as multitasking. It's called task switching. No one multitasks. It's like one of the greatest lies ever told.
Yeah.
So the more you try and do that, the more brain energy, ATP it's using. It's really called task switching. And this is a very difficult test. And so we tested them before and after the race. And we had athletes use in a crossover design, which is the kind of design I love, because you can actually look at the individuals, and they used all three different arms. So bioindividuality is kind of canceled out because we can look at each one of the participants and see how they responded to each intervention. So one intervention was placebo, the other one was caffeine, and the other one was paraxanthine. And what we saw was an increase in mental errors by about 23% with caffeine after the race. They're exhausted. Makes sense, right? And when we combined, actually, there was another arm, and I forgot to say that. There was a combination of paraxanthine and caffeine. And what we saw with that one was that it was kind of, in the middle. Placebo was pretty close to what would be baseline, pretty similar results. It was an increase of 4 or 5% mental errors. But there was an improvement in one group where there was a 10% improvement after the race, after they were exhausted because of the paraxanthine. They had a 10% decrease in mental errors, and that was paraxanthine. And so we don't see, in all the studies we've looked at, by the way, caffeine and paraxanthine do not have synergistic benefit. It's like literally adding mud to your crystal clear water. It just doesn't make sense. It literally could be extending the negative effects of caffeine when you actually put them together.
So swapping
That's
your
important.
afternoon coffee for paraxanthine doesn't really make sense. It's not like
Swap-
reduce your consumption. We just want to get rid of the caffeine completely.
Exactly. That's what we're seeing. I mean, we have some formulations with some companies that are using it where we'll allow like a little bit of natural caffeine to come into the equation. Like, let's say if it's a decaffeinated green tea or a decaffeinated green coffee berry that increases BDNF, neurofactor is an ingredient that does that. We allow for like up to like 35 milligrams of naturally occurring in a decaffeinated substance. But really, it doesn't make sense to, let's say, have 200 milligrams of caffeine and then 200 milligrams of paraxanthine. We're just not seeing benefit. And if anything, it may be more counterproductive. So this is why we're driving the message of, this is something else entirely. And the more we look at it in studies, and it's when it's by itself, it has dramatically better results. And that's when we're seeing, again, it's really like it's not just an acute nootropic effect. One, it's also having a neuroprotective effect. And then lastly, we have a study coming out on e-gaming that has been like 2 years in the making, a very difficult study to recruit for. They're playing like Super Smash Brothers, which is like an individual game, like versus like first person shooters where it's more team based. So this was very difficult to recruit for. But we pulled some early data so that we could file patents. And what we saw is caffeine has a declination in performance over time. That's adaptation effect. So that means you have diminishing returns, right? And that's why some people it takes more and more and more caffeine, right? When I was a kid, like caffeine was 60 milligrams in a Coke, right? And kids would go, bonkers, right? And then it became like there was like Jolt and some of these other like sodas, and it was like, and Mountain Dew was like 80 and Jolt was 100. And that was insane. Like I remember thinking, that's insane. Then it got to be 200 milligram in a pre-workout and like Rip Fuel and all these products. And then pre-workouts became 300 milligrams, and then comes Bang Energy. Now we have pre-workouts with 400 milligrams. And we have people that have died because that's actually where the GRAS limit is set, generally recognized as safe, right? With what happened at Panera Bread, where that girl consumed, I think she was like 20 years old or something. They had a charged lemonade at Panera Bread that was 395 milligrams per serving. She probably got an extra large cup and refilled it a few times. She probably had 1,200 milligrams in one sitting, which is insane.
That was on the menu at Panera?
It was, and she died. And there was another person that died as well
crap.
shortly thereafter. Yes.
I'm
So,
assuming they took it off the menu now.
yeah.
I
was
was
like-
paid for that
think
too.
once
Please
you
tell
have
me they were in
deaths-
big trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what we see, this is what's cool with a continued use of paraxanthine. When we looked, we're seeing the data go the opposite way. There's an adaptation effect going the other way where it's improving over time. So there's an acute nootropic effect, yes, but we're actually, I believe, seeing the brain heal and improve and have reduced oxidation, improved blood flow, improved neuroplasticity, like I mentioned, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So we're actually seeing the brain improve with continued use of paraxanthine. So while caffeine has declination in performance, we're seeing it go the opposite way with paraxanthine. We're super excited for that study to come out because yes, it's in e-gaming, but it'll have so much relevance to anyone that's in like, kind of like a cognitive endurance or cognitive fatigue scenario with like continued focus. Think of like special operators or, military, EMT, a lot of us are in those. Yeah, poker. Exactly. Poker players. I mean, you guys know about that very well. So yeah, 100%. So that's very exciting. We can't wait for that data to come out.
Awesome.
Okay. So I'm sold on paraxanthine, 1,000%. But I too love my coffee. I'm always just curious about the purpose of a substance that's created by nature. It's naturally occurring in our ecosystem. What do you think the purpose is if it's so toxic? And I'm assuming this is best case scenario. We've optimized the frequency, the dosage, it's clean. We're not adding sugar to it. Best case scenario, how is this toxic if it has been provided to us by nature?
I think it's complex. I I think if you read some books on caffeine, it's been theorized that maybe this is almost like something where the plant wants to take over the planet via its addiction, right? There could be something as insidious as that. We don't really like, we always think like we're the species, but we're cohabitating with other species that have been here for many more millions of years than us.
Mm-hmm.
And they all want to survive, right? And having a dependence on this would create a need to have this plant around. And so, we think the plant's dependent on us, but essentially we're dependent on that plant.
So they are winning right now.
In a sense, but here's another aspect too. I'm a formulator, as you know, pretty well known, but God always wins, right? God is the ultimate formulator. If I look at a plant, here's an example. This is where I love the brilliance of nature. So if I look at green tea contains caffeine. Yes, we know that. But green tea also contains L-theanine, which smooths out the effect of caffeine. It also contains EGCG, a polyphenol that increases blood flow and reduces oxidative stress. And there may be even more compounds that I'm not even fully aware of that are having like a holistic effect, an entourage effect, similar to cannabinoids, right? When we talk about CBD and like when you have full spectrum hemp, like when you have the terpenes and the CBG and the CBN and like like it has an entourage effect. And so when we take something out and we have caffeine anhydrous, we're not getting the same net effect like we would from the plant sources. So that's a reality too. One thing that I'm exploring though is that the 3-methyl group that's in theophylline and that's in caffeine could be one of the sources of kind of its metabolic stress or toxicity, if you will. And again, certain people have adapted to dealing with it very well, and some of us don't. So, it's kind of like one of these things like gluten and lactose and, 100 other things that some of us deal with these things well, some of us don't.
Yeah. It is about the individual component, but it's just so interesting that this plant in isolation has got a strong hold over us. I'm already picturing someone's going to make a new TV series, sort of like Last of Us with cordyceps taking over. Someone's going to make one about caffeine.
Exactly.
Taking
It
over
really
the human
is.
species. Yeah.
Michael Pollan in his book Caffeine makes that kind of argument, and he also did the documentary series in the book how to read your mind. No, how to
change your mind.
How to change your mind. That's it. How to change your mind.
How to read your mind
is
coming soon. No, just kidding.
That would be cool. I mean, that's if you hit like peak level of psychedelics. Maybe if you have like a lot of psychedelics and paraxanthine, you can get to like telekinesis and telepathy.
Totally. I believe in that.
I can just move things around with my mind. Like cool.
Yeah.
Renee, you could will a paraxanthine update drink to come to you in moments.
Come on, delivery truck. Where are you? Yeah. So, I mean, with so many people being addicted to it, and I've heard this saying, I don't know if R.A. Whitten is the one that coined this, but drinking caffeine today is stealing energy from tomorrow. And
yes,
that has always resonated with me. And I'm like, when I'm drinking it, I'm like, I'm going to feel good for a couple hours, but it's going to impact me tomorrow for sure. But people can't get off that cycle because you're never like, okay, I'm just going to let today totally suck because I got to go to work. I got to take care of the kids. I don't have time to have a day that totally sucks. So how do we get off that vicious cycle?
That's a
But also,
great point.
coffee's so delicious. You forgot that part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole nother thing,
Well,
is the deliciousness and just the cultural, like societal thing of like, hey, do you want to go grab a coffee at this cute coffee shop? I mean, that's like a whole nother thing. We need paraxanthine in the coffee shops, but yeah, what do we do, Shawn? How do we get off?
there's a lot of pieces there. If you remember Good Will Hunting, Minnie Driver says to Matt Damon, like, maybe we should get a coffee, and he says, yeah, why don't we just get some caramels? And she's
Yeah.
like, what?
Oh,
And
I don't
he's like,
remember
well,
that.
it's just as arbitrary as coffee, isn't it? Like, it's a really good point of like how we've been, driven by society to do certain things, like drink coffee or drink alcohol, or, the ways that we show up, right? Those things are changing, just like you're seeing Generation Z pretty much abandon alcohol entirely. I think future generations will abandon caffeine entirely. And while you say caffeine is delicious, I'm not arguing because I like coffee. Coffee is delicious. I'm not arguing that because I love coffee as well. I do decaf coffee, but
Okay.
that is a psychosomatic anchor that became something over time because of the effect of the caffeine probably driving your continued use of it. You then associate the smell, the taste with waking up. You also associate the smell and taste with interacting with other people, with the ritual of it, right? The warmth of it. There's a connection to it that's so much deeper psychologically than the taste of it. As a kid, like the first time you tried coffee, did you like say, so delicious? Like, same with alcohol, right? Like, I have
Yeah.
certain drinks that I love. Like, some people might love like a good whiskey, or I love a skinny margarita, like, but like,
Yeah.
where did that, like, if I was a kid and I tried that, probably wouldn't have liked that. It's something that is like more of that psychosomatic anchor on a lot of different fronts. There's deeper connections there. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah,
as
you're
far
really
as
making me
kind of
think. You're
say that
really
again.
making me think. I'm like, maybe I don't like the taste of it. I've just conditioned myself and put myself into this pattern where I'm not even, I'm not having that conversation. It's not a present moment choice at all.
Yeah, yeah, but that said, conditioning is powerful and you can use it to your advantage. Like there is coffees that are coming out with paraxanthine. You can most certainly, I just take a capsule of paraxanthine when I have a decaf coffee. So I love doing that. Like I still love the anchor of having some coffee. And for me, it's also a delivery system to have mushrooms, like as like a mushroom creamer. Sometimes I have MCTs and heavy cream if I'm like skipping a meal and I want to do kind of a fat fasting for breakfast. Like when I travel a lot, as you guys probably know, like I travel all over the world to speak and do business, and probably 60% of my year I'm traveling. And if I'm in an airport, I want to skip most of those foods, especially in the morning. I'll just go by a Starbucks and I'll get, a sugar-free, granted it's not great because it has sucralose, whatever, sugar-free syrup, and get like heavy cream in it. And I'm good to go for like the next 4 or 5 hours. And it's like
Mm.
that's a great way to kind of fuel your brain and skip. Of course, I don't have the caffeine, and it's low carb, so I think you
Yeah.
can still have your coffee and still go with the paraxanthine for sure.
Okay. So if someone wants to cut back, is this a cold turkey thing? Like tomorrow we're going to do the decaf coffee and paraxanthine and not look back and just, no, don't cold
No,
turkey.
no, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
a lot of people get headaches from that. I like it. It depends how bad your dependence is. Like some people have
Yeah.
a cup of coffee in the morning, and maybe it's like 120 to up maybe as much as 200 milligrams in the morning. But some people are having like energy drinks and coffee and pre-workouts and things all day, and it's like in the multiple gram category. If you were to like cut back from that, that would be very difficult. You have to
Got
titrate
it.
down.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I will just share for anyone that hasn't tried paraxanthine yet. Personally, for me, it's a very like slow, steady energy with mental clarity.
Yeah.
So for someone like you said, that's maybe like chugging down a bang with breakfast or something, this is gonna feel different. It is a cleaner energy. That's like the best way I can explain it. But I have a friend who drinks all these crazy energy drinks, and I gave her an update, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't feel anything." And I think she was expecting like this huge jolt of like crazy caffeine.
Yeah.
So I just think just expectation, like it's gonna feel different.
It does. And we do see people that are like extremely addicted to massive amounts of caffeine. They may need to try larger doses of paraxanthine. But to
Okay.
the point that you just made, there are some people that associate the dirtiness of caffeine with feeling it. And what that means is the headaches, the blood pressure, the arrhythmias, the agitation, the brain fog, like all that kind of like the extreme sympathetic nervous system. Like I call it like the frazzle,
Mm,
whereas paraxanthine
yeah.
is the flow. We've actually shown that people get
Yeah.
more into flow state on paraxanthine. So it's the flow without the frazzle, if you will. But there are some
Good.
people that are addicted to the frazzle, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just a reality. And you can see where that shows up across their life. And we could get into psychedelics and all that kind of
That's
stuff, but
yeah, that's gonna be
but
our
you can
segue in a
see
minute. Yeah.
there are people that are addicted to the frazzle for sure. And so, there are people that are mixing caffeine and paraxanthine, mixing, something like yohimbe and, some of these things that like increase blood pressure and other stimulants. And they're doing that. And, but I think the beauty of paraxanthine is it does feel clean, like you said. And once you get used to that, you're going to feel what it's like to be in like flow state is like if you imagine that yin and yang symbol, right? Like, and you're kind of in between where you can choose like just like masculine and feminine, right? And light and dark. And I tend to think of like the masculine and feminine archetypes as like feminine is more like the receiving and kind of like
Creativity.
creativity, pulling things in, manifesting things, like letting things come to you, right? Whereas the masculine energy is more chasing it down, going and getting it, more that sympathetic, right? So when you're in flow, you're kind of like dancing between like, I can chase it and I let it come to me. I chase it, I let it come to me. It's like a dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're dancing between sympathetic and parasympathetic, that fight, flight, or freeze, or like rest and digest. Like they can be healthy in certain amounts. Masculine and feminine can be healthy, like to kind of dance between, right? So to me, that's what it feels like, is like you can choose. So that's what like flow state is. Like you're stimulated, but you're also relaxed at the same time. Whereas caffeine is just hyperstimulated.
So is
Mhm.
caffeine more sympathetic nervous system and this paraxanthine's more parasympathetic? I mean, I know it's not totally black and white, but
No, like I think caffeine is just ultra sympathetic, whereas
okay.
paraxanthine has elements of like CNS stimulation, central nervous system stimulation, where it is stimulating sympathetic nervous system, but there's also a lot of aspects of it that are relaxing you.
Mm.
One, you're not getting all these side effects, but two, it's increasing blood flow, increasing BDNF, increasing glutathione and catalase, increasing serotonin, and all these things so that you actually feel better. Like it's a mood lifter. So it is a completely different experience. Like whenever I get into all this science and like someone's like, I don't know about all that. This is like a lot of science. I'm like, just try it. It's like, it's
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
experiential.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
discussion with a friend of mine that's a billionaire, and I was getting into all the science, and he's this AI billionaire, and I was like, bro, just try it. Like, and it's that simple. You try it once and you're like, whoa, this is like a completely different experience. And especially to your point, if you sub it out and use it for 7 days and you get rid of the caffeine entirely, at the end of the 7 days, you'll realize how much better you feel without the caffeine. You will feel like there's a study where with mice where they had caffeine every day, and after the third day, they needed that caffeine just to get to baseline, to get to where everyone else exists. They needed that caffeine to get to where everyone else already is.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. That's why you see all these people, like at the point you had at the top of the show about people being in line at the Starbucks. I've seen it. Like I've been at these conventions and shows, things I speak at, and I'll see a line of like 100, 200 people at a Starbucks. And I'm like, this is insane. They want to pay $7. They want to wait for an hour to get a coffee. And
Yeah.
that's the degree of addiction. And there's all these jokes of, like I can't wake up without my coffee and all this stuff. My brain doesn't turn on without my coffee. It's
Yeah.
real.
Don't talk to me before I've had my coffee. Yeah.
Oh
It's
yeah.
real. It's a
T-shirts,
real thing.
mugs. There's all the
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
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 I mean, it's just so wild, this vicious cycle that almost all of us are in. Have to have the caffeine to wake up. And then how many of those people are also taking something at nighttime to go to sleep? Like we are meddling like crazy rather than just
Exactly.
doing this holistic, synergistic flow that I think is inherent to our body's physiology. And I think this is like one of the most brilliant things in the health industry. What if we just did less? Like we're all just like putting more things in to function better. What if the magic is in taking all that stuff away and letting our body do what it's
So
now designed to do?
yeah, so that actually brings up one of my favorite classes of supplements, right? So, and it's actually very core to when I talk about like my supplementation around psychedelics, but my supplementation in general, my favorite class of supplements is adaptogens because it augments your allostatic capacity. It increases the size of your stress bucket, which I wrote about like pretty extensively in my book, which is really revolves around resilience, and that's the book, The Energy Formula. But this is about increasing your capacity to deal with physiologic and mental stress. And so these adaptogens are what's called bimodal, where you're getting both sides. Like, yes, like I can get better sleep and more energy during the day. And that's possible when you're like really increasing your resilience. You're increasing this natural size of your stress bucket. It's not to the point of what you talked about before with caffeine. Caffeine is a come at a cost ingredient, right?
Mm.
Whereas paraxanthine we're seeing is not that way, which makes it really unique. But caffeine definitely is one of those ingredients where you have it, maybe you get some benefit, but it's going to cost you. Just like sugar, you get maybe like a dopaminergic high from it, but there's going to be the crash, right? And so there's a cost associated with that. With adaptogens, you do not see that. It's actually improving your optimization. And so I love using things like ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginseng, maca. And if we look at the most storied ingredients across all cultures, if we look at India, it's ashwagandha. If we look at Asia, it's ginseng. If we look at Russia, it's rhodiola. If we look at Central and South America, it's maca. Interesting that these most important herbs are the adaptogens throughout history.
We've had the answers for so long. Like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. So with adaptogens, I'm also thinking adrenals. Like a lot of people have burned out their adrenals. That's not a scientific term, but does paraxanthine have any impact on the adrenals and cortisol?
Yeah, and that's a great point too on like what you would call like adrenal fatigue and like corticosteroids and you know, like release of epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, even dopamine. When those are chronically released, that can be a problem. What we see with paraxanthine is it tends to be one, it kind of has that more natural effect, like I was talking about with green tea, where it's smoother, where it's more kind of over time. And that would simulate more like if you do a cold plunge, you get a dopamine release over hours, right? It's like 2 to 3 hours that you have this dopamine release. When you do like really high intensity interval training with exercise, you get that kind of multiple hour effect. Whereas if you did cocaine, if you did sugar, it's like 15-minute, like high, low, crash. This is a very different thing. And so you can get in these loops, like just like with doom scrolling on social media. That's part of like that dopaminergic like wiring and those loops that you can stay in where it's like an addiction, like where it's like high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. So this can happen with caffeine. This can happen with you know, certain behaviors that are addictive and counterproductive, like, you know, porn, like I don't know, like you know, movies that are violent, or, you know, video games, or like a lot of the things that you see addictions with. It's going to be that type of drip of dopamine, right? That's making our decisions, that's making us addicted. When we look at paraxanthine, it is kind of this slow release that's like a more relaxed effect that feels clean, to your point. Like you don't get caught in that loop.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that.
I feel like this could be a good transition. Or did you have another question, Lauren, or can I?
Oh, before we do
Go on.
psychedelics, we've been dangling the psychedelic carrot the whole episode.
Yeah.
But if I'm holding a can, I want to just go through the other ingredients in here because I think it's really interesting that we have alpha GPC, we have vitamin C, we have B12. Can you kind of talk about the synergistic nature and how you thought about formulating these as a whole?
You've actually filed patents on a couple ingredients that have shown like really good synergy with paraxanthine. Because paraxanthine is dopaminergic, L-tyrosine, which is not in this, but I want to bring up, it was originally, but it had some issues with stability and foaming that just we had to pull it out. But L-tyrosine is dopaminergic as well, and really has been shown to have synergy with paraxanthine. Alpha GPC, which is in here, is a special form of choline. It's a more bioavailable form of choline that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And that is cholinergic, which one, you have the phospholipids that make up your brain, like phosphatidylcholine, but two, you have acetylcholine, which is a key neurotransmitter associated with deep work and focus, and that's going to contribute to that, as does paraxanthine. So we've seen like synergy on those ingredients. Methylcobalamin, you know, is just a great energetic ingredient in general. Really, one of the ways that it works is by increasing the effect on neurotransmitter like conduction, as well as neuronal synapses conducting too. So we do see a lot of effect on kind of on methylcobalamin, in particular, the methylated version of B12.
Mm. And for anyone that is taking other nutraceuticals with a lot of vitamin C or B12 specifically, any concern with drinking too many of these, or what is the recommendation? Or you're going to say one?
Those are water soluble vitamins. We don't tend to see like a negative effect with like B vitamins, C vitamins. Like where you could have issues is like A, D, E, K, like where they're fat soluble vitamins that can, you know, build up potentially.
Okay. I'm sure there's always bioindividuality, right? Because I know some people that can be quite sensitive to extra methylation, but
That's true. That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
To me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And actually, Lauren, I'm glad you asked about that, because Shawn, you've also put paraxanthine into supplements. So for someone, maybe they don't want a drink, you could take it in capsule form.
Yep, there
Wanna
are
share that's an
products that
option?
that have it solo. There's nootropic formulas that have it combined. There is pre-workouts with it. There's one called Euphoric with an IQ. That's a great pre-workout. Yeah, there's some great formulas out there.
Great.
Well,
All
I'm
right.
kind of curious about doing the decaf coffee with the paraxanthine because admittedly, this is so beautiful about these conversations. I'm like, oh, I got to go to the confessional now and tell you, like, I haven't done a day with update, but no caffeine from coffee. I know, I know. After this podcast, we're going to call Freddie Kimmel and see how he's doing off his caffeine, and we're all going to get re-inspired here. It's good.
Okay, well, just do me a favor. Literally go 7 days and see how it goes.
Okay, I will do
Yeah.
anything for you, babe. So
Oh, thank
it's
you.
gonna happen. Oh, I think
Okay.
we do want to know about psychedelics, and I just have to share before we get into this conversation. Every time I'm on a microdosing protocol, I am very aware of how overstimulated I am by coffee. And it's sort of like
Mm.
the multitasking thing where I get like an aversion to multitasking. I get an aversion from over caffeinating. And it really actually helps me simplify everything in my day and my health routine. Can you share with us how this could be a potent ingredient for changing habits?
100%. And how there's a lot of science here and a lot of woo that I can't really explain, but there is something I've been working on for quite some time that is, it revolves around, I call it echo dosing. So, and I've trademarked this concept where if you're in a journey and you have like a certain strain of mushroom, and maybe you have like ceremonial cacao, and you have maybe wachuma, and maybe there was a heart opener or whatever it is, you have that facilitator potentially create a microdose of that journey. So this goes back to the idea of psychosomatic anchoring. And then I have a lot of supplements that I would give post journey to really enhance neuroplasticity, enhance your body's ability to deal with stress in the coming weeks after so that you can integrate better. But what I would do is also microdose those supplements I'm going to give post journey for several weeks during the journey. So this is the whole echo dosing so that your body's aware in these tiny doses. What happens, think about like when you are in a journey, if someone listening has, knows what this is like, if you've done a larger psychedelic experience. Let's say like if it's psilocybin, like, kind of in that 2.5 to 5 gram range, and you hear a song playing. Now there's music playing the whole night. That whole playlist could be incredible, right? That whole playlist could kind of bring you back into that mood, make you think of like, oh, that was a good journey. But if there's a song, a specific song that when you're having this epiphany, when you're literally like imprinting neuroplastically on your brain, like something that's so powerful that you think, oh my God, like literally there's like neurons rewiring and connecting in a way that have never connected before. You have that aha moment. The light bulb goes off. If there's a song playing at that time, if there's a smell in the air at that time, it can bring you back to that exact moment, that exact feeling. So that's the idea that I've been playing with that I think could be very powerful in your body, like anchoring back to that knowing so that you have this echo dosing. So one thing that's really powerful is how well does microdosing work on its own with someone that has never journeyed? How well does microdosing work if someone has journeyed? How well does microdosing work if it's the exact same strain as the journey, following the journey? There's a lot there to kind of explore.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
there's no real research there, but I can tell you just from anecdotal feedback, like it's definitely more powerful when there has been a journey and it's the same strain, maybe even prepared by that exact same facilitator, maybe when it has the other ingredients of that journey.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, the
that could
macros
be
are always more obvious, right? Because they're amplifiers and we're like turning it up. So the microdosing is more challenging to people. So yes, I think people can feel, see, download more. But I'm also
exactly.
in the middle, like, do we have to? Do we have to macro? I think we can get a lot out of it.
Exactly. And that's a great point too. And maybe microdosing and kind of mini dosing could be a way to ease someone into doing a journey.
Yeah.
Because maybe going into the journey space may be too much for them, you know, initially. It can be quite difficult and challenging. You know, sometimes if you know what you're doing, it can be more playful. But what I've found is dosing is really a question. It's not a question of, oh, I'm a 225-pound guy, like over 100 kilos, and you're like half my weight as ladies. Oh, so I take twice as much. That has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
It has everything to
Yeah.
do with your nervous system. Where is your nervous system at? Here's an example. If you're drinking, right? And you know, almost everyone knows drinking, and maybe they don't know, you know, what it's like to be in the journey space. But if you're drinking, you're kind of drunk or buzzing, and you know, you're kind of like, you know, hobbling around, and someone cracks their head on the pavement, and there's blood everywhere. Like you're gonna go boom, like ready to go. Sympathetic nervous system, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol shoots in, your heart rate goes up, you're ready to go. Like there's no more drunk. There's no more kind of buzzing. You're out of that. You're ready to go.
That's a great point.
Same with the psychedelic space. The more your nervous system is kind of in that sympathetic place, especially if you're kind of like ultra sympathetic, then it's going to take more and more and more to overpower that. And what I found is like initially I needed like heart openers. I needed 5 grams, 5.5 grams to like just get into the journey space. Then when I was like really getting deep into the work, doing meditation, I was down in Costa Rica. I was completely like digitally detoxed. I was like going to bed with like the sunset and like looking at the ocean every night. And I had like 1 gram and I was having like crazy like visuals and like I was like in a full-on journey on 1 gram. And you know, that can happen even when you think about like what's supposed to be a microdose. It depends. And you talk to people like they've had a microdose and they had kind of like a semi journey, you know, and some people it's like, I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
This has everything to do with your nervous system and kind of how you prepare and set intentions and relax your body to get into that space. That has everything to do with that.
Yeah. Well, and the control of your mind, right? Like we look at biology of belief and controlling
Oh,
the senses. It's so funny you bring this up because I just did a ceremony a week ago and one of my fellow practitioners that was there, she was in this space of I'm only going to do, she actually did a little less than 1 gram and she had a big experience because her mind is so controlled that she could access that
yeah.
with less.
Yeah, and also, you know, to that end, you know, there's people that are facilitators that have a microdose so they can get into the same space as the people that they're facilitating and kind of be more heightened in their awareness. But like this is the kind of thing where like if you were not drinking but you were around 20 drunk people, you'd feel drunk.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's the same with like psychedelics. Like it heightens like the more, especially the more empathic you are, which I like very much am. I'm a huggy, touchy, you know, feely person. Like I'm all in my feels, heart on my sleeve. I get burned by people, but I love people deeply. You know, it's that whole thing. So I get into these spaces and it's just like I'm feeling everything about everyone around me. And if someone's really in deep, then I get in deeper too, you know? And if I'm around someone because I'm very empathic, like a lot of times people like lean into me and then go into deeper spaces just because I'm around,
Mm.
because they feel safe. You know, it's like a masculine, safe energy. This is the thing, like if you're with like the proper facilitator or the right people in the environment, you can think of it as like the lifeline, like where, you know, the deep sea diver has the, you know, oxygen hose, or the, you know, the guy out in space, you know, that's like tethered to the, you know, space shuttle, or whatever it is. They can travel out further, like when they feel safe, when they know that that lifeline is there. You can go into these deeper spaces, right? And if you weren't feeling safe, you barely leave the boat or the space shuttle. But when you feel safe, you can go into those deeper spaces. And I have people that just gravitate to like the energy I provide. And by the way, that's not everyone, because whatever is like the right person or the right environment varies from person to person.
Yeah.
You know, I've told people this is very important. I think you've seen a talk of mine where I talked about this, that, you know, like a woman that's been through like a sexual assault, you know, I could be the kindest, nicest, most amazing facilitator that everyone loves, but I may not be right for you because you're just not in that space. You need a woman right then, and then maybe you need a woman and a man that are married. And so you don't have kind of confusing energy or like, you know, all that stuff, right? Like, so it just depends on what you need. So don't listen to what the facilitator tells you. Don't listen to what, you know, the people that are going to go into the journey are telling, oh, this is the greatest person ever. Go with like what feels safe to you and trust your intuition. Intuition is a very powerful tool, and we've learned to completely discredit it.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've had two experiences that were almost like on the other sides of the spectrum of what you were just saying. One where I didn't feel really safe. I didn't feel like I could let go. And it was, to be honest, it was because everyone in the space was on the same dose. And my brain went to, if something happens, no one can take care of me or the group. And I just couldn't let go of that. So that was a not great, pleasant experience. The other end of the spectrum, I went with Ta and Cole, who I met through you, Shawn, and we've had them on the podcast before in Costa Rica. I felt so safe with them. And I was a little nervous the day of the journey. And I remember looking at Ta and I was like, I don't think I could do this. And my husband's there and he's like, this is why we came to Costa Rica for today. This is it. And Ta was like, look, I'm going to give you the amount that intuitively I think would be right for you. And I said, okay, I trust that process. I don't know how much he gave me. Doesn't matter. And I had an amazing journey. And just having that safety was, oh my gosh, it was such a game changer. Can't
You
be
can let
overrated.
go.
Yeah,
So
I totally let go.
those are two most important people in my life and in my story. I know you've seen some of my talks, and like this, like every time I think about it, like it makes me want to cry, because I was like on the verge of suicide when I first met them, like right at the beginning of 2020, going into like that New Year's, going into 2020, right before COVID. And I was either going to work myself to death or kill myself. And I was very, very successful in all the ways that you can think of, except for peace and happiness. Um, and they are incredible facilitators, masculine and feminine. Again, they are linked to each other. They're not like, you know, that they're flirty in the right ways that make you feel good about you, but there's never like any confusion or, you know, weird sexual energy coming in. They make everyone feel included. You know, I remember going into, not only was there the fear of COVID and massive vaccines, but then there's Black Lives Matter. There was a lot of politics going on. And I was in these spaces with people that were gay, that were thinking about trans, that were Black, that were white, that were Jewish, that were Republican, that were Democrat, that believed in all the conspiracy theories, that hated all the conspiracy. And I was like sitting with all these people that like had crazy different beliefs. and yet there was like a deep respect and love for everyone there. There was never any issues. Like, and I was like, man, it's like if we really talk to each other and connect on a heart level, like we can have differences, but like still respect and love each other. And it's like, it makes you think about like how we're being controlled to, I've studied NLP, and if you look at neurolinguistics programming and like the way we get programmed, especially by the media, by politicians, by all these different groups, we're made to believe that your Apple, Android, that your PlayStation, Xbox, that your McDonald's, your Burger King, your Coke, your Pepsi, your Republican, your Democrat, your vaccine, your no vaccine, your, all these different things. There's two groups, always. If we're all the same group, we all believe the same way. If we have 3 or more beliefs, there's always a discussion. But what happens, there's a type of bias that comes in when when there's only 2 choices, whatever you choose has to be the right choice, and you will vehemently defend it. And so now this is like why they put you in boxes. And if I was to talk to you about, let's say, something controversial, it could be like, gun rights, abortion, vaccines. If I talk to people about, vaccines, they're going to say, well, this person will be like, I like the ones that are not mRNA, that are just, kind of the dead virus. And, like, I think maybe like if you're, in your 60s and older, or like maybe if there's comorbidities, probably not with children, but like, well, it depends on, like, maybe if there was more testing, I think we should start with people that are more high risk. Like if you talk to people, there isn't like, oh yeah, yep, I'm for it. No, I'm against it. There's a whole spectrum, right? A spectrum of beliefs. And whether we talk about gun rights, we talk about abortion, we talk about whatever it is, there's a spectrum. Why is it that we're always put in our boxes? It's a means of control. It's a means of keeping people in fear. And so, that's what happens. And, that's kind of a diatribe, if you will, but like, it's really important to what I learned with Ton Cole around my body feeling safe around so many others that have varying beliefs, because I stopped believing that there's 2 beliefs. And I believe that there's almost never 2 beliefs. Everyone is unique in their beliefs, and everyone's on a journey. When I was a kid, my dad was a pastor. I was a strong Christian because that's what I was told. Then I became atheist when I went to college, and I was arguing with people, telling them how stupid they were. Then, I started doing more introspection, getting a little older, and I became agnostic. And I'm like, well, as a scientist, I'm like, I don't know. It's hard to say what's what. Who knows? And then after I did my journeys and did like a lot of deeper work, I actually came full circle, and I believe, but I don't believe at the cost of someone else's belief. And so like, I think about my own path, and that's true of like so many things that I believe. And it's like, I'm going to hold someone to their beliefs now. Well, it's like everyone's on a journey. So it's ridiculous to like, just assume that their beliefs aren't going to change over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah.
Go ahead, Renee.
I was saying it's a good point. I never really thought of it this way, but like I hear that, or I get that question a lot. Like, are you pro-vax? Are you anti-vax? Are you pro this, anti? And I'm like, well, do you have 5 minutes to talk about it? Because it's not just a yes or no. And actually, I was just telling the story the other day during the pandemic. I had posted something. I had reshared someone's post, just saying, remember that the people on both sides, the boxes, as you said, are human. Like we're all human. And I lost 2 friends over that post. They said, we can't be friends with you anymore. And I'm like, I don't know. I still feel like and it wasn't even my post. I shared someone else's post. Maybe they didn't say it the way they wanted to hear it, but I'm like, we're all part of the human experience. And I think we all deserve to feel and believe the way we want, but
We're
still
also
not.
all interpreting the movie however we want to.
Yeah, clearly they interpreted that post in a different way, but
Yeah. I have a theory that I think, and I would love to know your thoughts on this, Shawn, that relates to this binary thinking, the two choices. And you kind of mentioned this earlier with paraxanthine, like binary thinking structure, black and white, to me feels very masculine, whereas the femininity can keep us kind of in the flow and the creativity and on the spectrum in the gray area. And that feels like a massive imbalance in the human species, where a lot of us are not resolved in this synergistic nature of masculine to feminine. And so then we have a lack of safety. And so then we feel fear and push into this binary structure. But whether it's the paraxanthine or the psychedelics or just meditation, if we could resolve this interplay between masculine and feminine and be okay with being somewhere in between, that feels like a solution.
I have explored those concepts so much for like probably thousands of hours, and I have never thought of that way. That's really a connection that I've never made. That's really powerful, Lauren, because I think you're right. Like, a man, like in the way they think, and again, this isn't like someone's going to be like, oh my God, like what's some, like masculine typified, the way the masculine brain tends to think, tends to be more logic driven, tends to make quicker decisions. Yes, no, black, white. You're right. That does make a lot of sense, because it is about like when you're driven and you're doing, like there's less kind of like thinking through things to the same degree as like I think the feminine brain tends to view things more emotionally, creatively, empathically, into which there are like a lot more to the spectrum and gradations, right? Like that's an amazing point, and like really something that I feel like has come through when you do journeys, ceremonies, whatever you want to call it. A lot of the work that needs to be done, I believe, is mostly in the wounded masculine. And I know for certain that was me, was very much wounded masculine. I've been probably to, more than 100 journeys, many of which were many people. And I've seen that repeatedly, whether it's men or women, that masculine energy that's wounded about doing, and we lose sight of the human being. We think we're the human doing, and we need to heal that masculine to be that protector, provider. Sometimes it's just like if you're a woman, sometimes that's to yourself, right? Being able to protect and provide for that inner child. But with the feminine, like healing that aspect, getting in touch with that aspect, feeling safe with yourself is where you can take that breath, where you can surrender, where you can do self-care, where you can think about love, empathy, healing, and look at the gradations of humanity, and where you're not just discarding quickly and making decisions quickly and saying, this person's black, I don't like them. This person's handicapped, I don't like them. This person's a Republican, I don't like them. This person's a vaxxer, I don't like them. It's like, whoa, what is that? Like we need to get into the space where like we feel safe. And when it's like I was looking at a quote today, like the more you let your light shine, the more others feel the ability to let their light shine. That's why, like, when I feel safe, when I feel balanced with masculine and feminine, when I feel like I'm exuding love, it allows others to get into that space more freely, more easily. Like, you pick up on micro gestures, you pick up on pheromones and different energies around people, just like a dog does. Like, a dog can tell whether you're like a dog person or you're not right away.
Yeah.
And people do too. We're evolved to feel this. So like whether there's safety in this person or that room or not right away. But oftentimes we're kind of overriding our intuition. And intuition is very much a feminine energy. and women have it in spades, and men often get out of touch with it because we're just so logic driven. And so it's an amazing point. I love that one. It's a great job, Lauren.
Thank you. We love this conversation, just exploring the mind. And, we have the toolbox. We've talked about that today. Paraxanthine, psychedelics, or tools.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear from you as we kind of come full circle here, your perspective and maybe some simple advice for people that they can take home to start optimizing, whether it be habits, mindset, and maybe like knowing when and where these tools could come in.
That's a great question. And I think it starts with, it really starts with the idea of self-love. When I was self-loathing, I was using all the biohacks to drive myself harder. It wasn't a question of optimizing my health. It was, how do I get more, 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 and survive what I'm doing to myself? Because I hate myself, I'm going to try and accomplish more, be more that human doing. Finally, I'll get that praise. Finally, I'll get that adulation that I've been so desperately seeking. But of course, the second I get it, like I need something else, somewhere more. I keep like moving the bar, like if I was on Ben Greenfield, well, you're not on Joe Rogan, you're a loser. Like, it's just, it's like this cycle that never stops, right? And so when I finally got into the psychedelic experience and learned, like my epiphany was I could have love and be loved. That was my epiphany.
That's huge.
Like, it sounds so obvious. If someone asked me before, as the man, as the masculine energy, right, I would have logicked my way through that. I would have said, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. Of course, yeah. Yep. Okay, what else? But when like I felt it and it was like anchored in my heart and I was like wide-eyed, like I don't have to earn love. I like someone can just love me because I am. Like love isn't fleeting or conditional. People could just love me no matter what I believe in my politics or vaccines or what color I am or what gender I am. Like they would just love me. Like going back to that. And it's real. And so when I believed those things, when I anchored that in my heart, my whole life changed. I felt safe. I never had intimacy because I couldn't protect and provide for myself. As a man, I'm supposed to protect and provide for the feminine. But if I can't do that for myself, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that for a woman. Or whatever the dynamics of your relationship are, essentially. Again, these are kind of energies and take with it what you will. But that was the epiphany for me. And then all those biohacks that I had known my whole life, all of a sudden were about optimization. I was building on a solid foundation of self-love. And that's why I see a lot of biohackers, and I'm not going to name names, that are in unhealthy spaces that don't look that healthy. I don't want to go any further than that, but like I'll just say that because I feel like mentally they're not in a great space. Right? Yeah. And so if they found love, felt love, and were just kind of in a space of flow and calm, right? Like we were talking about that flow where you can dance between the masculine and feminine, dance between sympathetic, parasympathetic. And they didn't have to prove themselves anymore. They didn't have that imposter syndrome and that energy. Then all those other things that they know to do would actually be much more powerful. And that's why typically we're seeing people in these blue zones that are like smoking and drinking and, whatever, they're living longer. They look better because they have connection, they have purpose, because they sit down for 3-hour meals, because they have love in their lives. And that's the game changer. That's the most important biohack, period, the end.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
everything you just said. And I just got back from 2 weeks in Europe, and I witnessed a lot of what you just said. And you go out to dinner, and even 3 hours later, as the American, you're like, can I get the check? And the server's like, you want to leave now? You've only been here 3 hours. Um, so I'm like, I've been thinking and noticing a lot since I got back a week ago, looking at biohackers, and I'm like, God, are we missing the bigger picture here? And I recently did a hair mineral test tissue analysis with a colleague of ours. And I'll be totally honest. He's like, Renee, you've been chronically stressed for years. And I'll say that on the show. Like, I think that as biohackers, as podcasters, we feel like we need to be these people of perfect health. I'm not. I don't feel like I am. And I think there are others in the space that feel like they need to hide that. And this colleague who did the test, he's like, I've run a lot of hair tests on biohackers. And he's like, there are a lot that are hiding what's really going on with their health.
Like people that look at metrics, right? Like looking at all the metrics and getting caught up in the numbers and doing all the the little interventions, the pills, the peptides, the procedures, all the things. Can I get in this chamber and use this light and whatever? And it can be like an exhausting amount of things that you're caught up in. And it reminds me of like in the Bible, it talks about like, works versus like actually like having like the actual love in your heart. Like you can't get there by works alone. It's like, yes, you're doing all the things, all the like doodads and all the like little biohacks, but where is your heart at? Where's your peace at? If you're doing all that, it can actually cause stress, right? It can create more stress. You can get caught up in this, like looking at all the metrics and what they all mean, and it's 100%. And I see like that type A personality in biohacking all the time. Everyone's like the wounded masculine entrepreneur and blah 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 blah, right? And when you look at these people in blue zones, they don't know what time it is. They show up when they show up. They're there for those many hour dinners. They have deep connection. They feel like there's 100 people in their family. It's a very different life.
And they're not taking their coffee to go.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I noticed there were a couple places, more so in Switzerland, they actually would advertise, we have to-go cups. I'm like, oh, they're marketing to the tourists.
Oh, that makes me sad. I mean,
Yes.
I love a to-go cup, but
Just
I mean, really, if
interesting.
we zoom out and simplify this, it's like, yes, can we do less? Can we be more? Can we get into our heart, our intuition, control the mind to create or find love, joy? And then like, we don't need all this extra stuff. Or if you want to opt in, great. It just amplifies, right?
Guess what? If you feel self-love, if you feel contentment, which is actually more important than happiness, if you look at a lot of studies, contentment is actually the thing over happiness. It's not realistic to be happy all the time. That's kind of a ridiculous idea, but contentment is really important. If you look at these things, what would happen if you did feel happy, plugged in, passionate, content almost all the time? You wouldn't need all the things. You wouldn't need the cars, the clothes, the makeup. You wouldn't need all these different things. You wouldn't be as easily controlled for the politics, for the fear-based news and clicks. That wouldn't be there. You wouldn't be on social media as much. All those things would just kind of fade away because you have a strong relationship with yourself, with God, with your friends, with family. All of a sudden, who cares about clothes? Who cares about the car? Who cares about the house? Who cares about like having another table or, a cool bedspread, or like, you're just like, who gives a crap about that? I'm happy with my life because I love myself. I love God, I love being here. I love my dog. I love, my kids. I love, my friends. Like, I love nature. Like, I don't need any of that.
Yeah, I really don't. I One final thing, we'll wrap up. I noticed my cats, I buy them cats. I have 2 cats, not 20 cats. I buy them fancy, expensive toys and they don't use them. I put out the Amazon box with the trash and they live it up. And I'm like, gosh, the humans kind of, we can learn a lot from that.
Overcomplicate things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Shawn, thank you for another beautiful conversation. We love you so much and your energy. And I will say, with your masculine energy, the first time I met you, we were staying in a house. There were 5 women, and you were the only man in the house, but you made everyone feel comfortable and loved and safe. And I love you so much. So thank you for joining us today.
Renee, thank you, Lauren. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And ditto to everything she says. And it almost feels insignificant at this point, but also very valuable because you've created an amazing thing. Can you tell us where to find update?
Yeah, you go to drinkupdate.com, and you can get more on the drink. There also is at drink update, like on Instagram, etc. You can go to at Infinity Energy, Infinity, and learn more about Paraxanthine. It's distributed by TSI. And then you can go to ShawnWells.com, find out more about me, SHAWN, or go to at Shawn Wells on Instagram. And yeah, and then there's the energy formula, and you can go to energyformula.com. There's a book, there's Audible, hardcover, softcover, ebook. There's a course coming by the end of the year. So yeah.
Oh, awesome.
You're doing incredible things. Thank you for all the gifts that you bring to the world.
Oh, thank you. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
We love you too. We keep you many more hours if we could.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you next time.